top. Whipping like I run it from the cops. I ain't gotta worry about no ops. Young David, I stay with the rock. I'm blessed. All praise to the top. Whipping like I run it from the cops. I ain't gotta worry about no ops. Young David, I stay with the rock. I'm blessed.
To the host with the most, no cap. Got a lot of love to show, and then with a double tap. On hearts, no space, love him all of my days. His thoughts are higher, gaining all of his ways. Figured out the mud through the pain and the grief, like a vegan lifestyle, no beef in the streets. That's a blessing now these days. Show the most high's love will go a long way. I'm a servant, he the light. Do this R&B thing, I'm the plug, he the light. Got all my spectacles, cause my blessings out of sight. Make it weary, don't mount up and take flight. The Ruach move me, yeah. Oh, the Ruach soothe me, yeah. Stay wavy and groovy. He make my life just like a movie.
All praise to the top. Whipping like I run it from the cops. I ain't gotta worry about no ops. Young David, I stay with the rock. I'm blessed. All praise to the top. Whipping like I run it from the cops. I ain't gotta worry about no ops. Young David, I stay with the rock.
Thanks for me. Y'all was with me.
Shabbat Shalom, family. It's your boy Solemn Prophet here with my co-host Professor S in the building. How y'all doing? That was my jam, man. I've been playing that thing all day. Shout out to my bro. Shout out to my Ayo, man. He been snapping with his new album Wonderland. Go check it out. Matter of fact, I'm gonna find that link and I'm gonna put that link in the description. So check out that link. Check out my Ox album, full of fire, that R&B flavor. You know what I'm saying? I told him the other day, I said, you know, you like the Hebrew Charlie Wilson. And he was like, hey. Yeah, the brother's super talented. All praises to the Most High. How everybody doing?
I'm
great. Doing good here. How are you? How are you both doing?
Hey, I'm like my Ox song. I'm blessed.
Yeah, that's a good jam.
All praises.
Yeah, that's my thing right there. Boy, that's the new anthem. That song just makes me happy. Woke up this morning with the song on my mind. Started playing the song on repeat. Got my day started. Got the Shabbat rocking. You know what I'm saying? Closing out. You know what I'm saying? Feast of Tabernacles.
Oh,
it's awesome. All praises.
That's amazing. Oh,
all
I've been
praises.
really happy today too. I'm not sure why, but I've just been really happy today too. So it's in the air.
Oh yeah. Don't be surprised if I play that song again before the end of the night. I'm just giving y'all fair warning. You feel me? Just giving y'all fair warning. Well, you already know my brother. Go ahead.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
And tell them what we do.
So, today we will be discussing the new moon. We're talking about the new moon, when it is and when it's not.
Tess, Cindy, my sisters, Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to the show. Thank you for being on the panel. Y'all get that special introduction. You know, I was about to say because y'all the only ones on here, but hold on, wait a minute. Hold up, wait a minute. Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, sis. We got Sister Andrea in here.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Thank you for having me. First time guest.
Absolutely. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, welcome.
I'm excited.
Thank you.
I'm excited. Thank you for being here. I feel even better. I was already feeling good, but you just made me feel even better, sis. It's so good to have you.
Well, I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Since this is your first one, I'll reiterate. Everybody know this, but for Shabbat Talk, me and Professor S don't just want to be up here doing all of the talking. We want this to be more interactive, more of an open discussion. Yes, we do have information to bring out. However, we want you guys to chime in and give your thoughts. It might be something that you've been reading, or maybe you see something in the script that we don't mention, or maybe you disagree with what we're saying. Whatever the case may be, we would love for you guys to engage in the conversation so that it doesn't feel like we're just like two professors standing up here in the front of the class and just talking and y'all taking lecture notes. But absolutely, welcome to everybody else who comes in later. There's a couple more people that should be here soon, but for time purposes, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Like Professor S just said to everybody, this week we are going into determining the new moon, right? And the reason why this came up, I was actually on a road trip on our way back home from Chicago, and we stayed at a sister's of mine's house, and me and her got to talking, and we had this conversation before in the past, but it's been probably about a year or so since we had that conversation, and we were talking about new moon, and I keep it with the dark moon, right, for the first sliver of light, and she kept it with the full moon. And with this sister, it's always love, and it's always edifying one another, right? Edification. It's about iron sharpening iron, but it's not about who's right, who's wrong. We just share it, right? So I was like, well, when you mentioned a full moon, I said, have you ever went into Enoch 78, or when was the last time you went to Enoch 78? Now, it was a while. It's been a while before I really truly went in depth back into Enoch 78. And so we pulled it up right there at the house, going into the scriptures, and started to read the entire chapter. And I was like, this is reading a little bit different from what I remember. And it caused a little bit of confusion. We were both like, because at first I was like, yeah, new moon ain't the full moon. And she was like, new moon is the full moon. And then I started to read, and I was like, you know what? I'm not too sure no more. Like this, it kind of got me. But I learned that it was the version that I was reading. I didn't have my book of Enoch on me. We was on the road, so I quickly Googled it and pulled it up and read it. And it was just, I guess it's the verbiage and everything. I called Professor S and was like, yo, we're going to have to chop this up, and we're going to have to put, look back into it, do a study on this. And so that's kind of how the topic of tonight came about. And I went into it just trying to get clarity, and understanding what that chapter in Enoch is talking about, as well as looking at other scriptural evidence to support whatever the truth about the new moon is.
Yeah, that chapter in Enoch is very it can be overwhelming, right? It's got all this stuff, it goes into this portal and then it comes out of this portal, it can be very overwhelming, and especially not having the original text to go to. Overwhelming is probably the best word. So it's not a light subject. It's pretty heavy, and there's lots of room for misunderstandings and confusion and so forth. So yeah,
absolutely. So ultimately today, I hope one thing is, I think I got a good grasp of that chapter, understanding the context, the verbiage, what it's saying, and I think I got a good breakdown on it. However, the goal of today is not for me, not for any of us on the panel, really, per se. It's for everybody who watches this video. If you don't understand the fact of new moon or the Most High's calendar and keeping his holy set apart calendar, the lunisolar calendar, right? Then maybe this will be that first introduction to it, that you can start, looking and doing your own research on it. And then for those who are keeping it, but are keeping it from a full moon perspective as new moon, then maybe this will give you some new information, some things that you might not have considered before. Because I went into it with the mindset of, hey, listen, if the evidence points to a full moon, then I got to rehash some things, right? I got to do some internal inventory to figure out, where I was in error and to correct that and repent, right? So I was willing to be wrong going into this study, and I think that's important when you're doing research. You don't really want to go into research to prove your point, because whatever evidence you find, you're going to see it through a certain lens, and then that evidence you're just going to see as what's helping your cause or not helping your cause. So you want to observe everything objectively, and then take that information, and that's what you whatever points to the truth, and that's what you hold on to. And whether the truth is something that you already had a understanding of, or that truth means now you got to go back to the drawing board and rehash whatever your understanding was. So with that being said, last week we talked about how the platform is changing a little bit, what we're going to be doing on these shows. Before we get into any of the topics, right, we're going to start off with a Torah portion. Next week actually starts the actual first Torah portion of the new biblical year. However, just because we're changing the platform vibe, we're going to do a Torah portion today on this Shabbat, and it'll actually be technically the last Torah portion
before we start the next cycle. Yep.
Right before we start the next cycle, exactly. So, with that being said,
Shalom and welcome to Parsha in 60 Seconds. Today's portion is from Deuteronomy 33:1 through 34:12. It is called Vezot Habracha, which means, and this is the blessing. Before Moses died, he bade the Israelites farewell with a long detailed blessing. Moses prayed that the tribe of Reuben survive, though its numbers were few, that Judah would be restored and helped against its foes, that the Levites would have substance, favor their undertakings, and smite their enemies. Benjamin would continue to rest securely beside God, between God's shoulders. Joseph to have a good harvest, Zebulun to rejoice in its journeys, and Issachar in its tents. Gad like a lion who executes God's judgment for Israel. Dan like a lion's whelp that leaps from Bashan. Naphtali to take possession of the west and south. Asher to be the favorite among the tribes, dip its feet in oil, and have door bolts of iron and copper and security all its days. Moses then praised God for being a mighty protector like no other. At 120 years old, Moses climbed a mountain, saw the land, and died. The Israelites mourned for 30 days, and Joshua, filled with God's Spirit, became their leader. Never again did a prophet like Moses arise, who spoke face to face with God. And that is Vezot Habracha in 60 seconds.
all right. I know that was quick. There's a whole lot of information. Covered three separate chapters in Deuteronomy. Each week, Professor S will let us know what we're going to be covering for the next week for a portion. So everybody will have a heads up, what we need, so that way when we do this next week, we cover the Torah portion. Everybody can kind of chime in and give their 2 cents on what they read and what they understood. So no worries there. Nobody got a heads up this week, so we're just going to briefly talk about it. I'll bring up one thing that I found interesting. I actually highlighted it and underlined it in my scripture, my Bible, chapter 33. Because people don't talk, I don't really hear people talk about this often. I've mentioned this seldomly over the years, but I'll read starting from verse 1 to verse 5. It says, "And this is the blessing wherewith Moses, the man of Elohim, blessed the children of Israel before his death. And he said, The Most High came from Sinai and rose up from Seir unto them. He shined forth from the Mount Paran, and he came with 10,000s of saints. And his right hand went a fiery lawfulness. Yea, he loved the people. All his saints are in thy hand, and they sat down at thy feet. Everyone shall receive thy words." Now here's the part that I'm talking about. "Moses commanded us a law, even the inheritance of the congregation of Jacob. And he was king in Jeshurun, when the heads of the people and the tribes of Israel were gathered together." So, interesting that he was king. I mentioned, the first real king of Israel. Obviously, it wasn't a king set up with a kingdom, so to speak, right? Saul was the first king, and then David was anointed after that. But Moses, if you think about all his duties, his responsibilities, the way he led, the type of power and authority that he had in Israel, he was king. He operated as a king. That was very interesting for me, because when we think about a king, our first mind jumps straight to Saul. Right?
Mm-hmm. And like as Peter talked about, that Israel was a royal priesthood, right? And in Exodus, it says that Israel was supposed to be a kingdom of priests, right? They weren't supposed to have just one king, right? Their king was supposed to be the Most High, right? But they were all supposed to be kings, right? But when all of this went down, they forfeited that, and then Moses had to step up and be in the position of the king, you know. And
Absolutely.
it's like when Israel kept demanding a king, you know, as you were talking about with Saul, and Samuel was like, why are they doing this? And the Most High told him what to tell him. He says, look, he's gonna, if you set up a king like all these other nations, he's going to do this, he's going to do this, he's going to do this, and you're not going to like it. And they said, no, we want a king. And Samuel said, he said, oh my goodness. And the Most High said, look, don't worry, they're not rejecting you, they're rejecting me. They were rejecting him as being their king, because they wanted a single king over their nation here.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And they got got all of that.
Yeah, and all of the consequences to go along with it, you know.
Absolutely. How often do you read between Chronicles, Kings, first, second Chronicles, first, second Kings, and it says, and such began his reign, and such did not what was pleasant in the eyes of the Most High, and turned heart's way, and all of that. Like, it was so many wicked kings that did so many wicked things,
and led the whole nation astray. Whereas had they maintained the position they were supposed to have, they wouldn't have been led astray by the single individual, right?
Yep. Absolutely. Anything stand out to you, Professor S?
Well, I think it's very interesting to note that after all of the great things that Moses did, he still had to suffer the consequences for his actions, and he was not able to actually set foot in the promised land. He was still allowed to view it, right? He got to see it and behold it with his eyes, but because he had not done what he was commanded to do, he wasn't able to actually set foot in the promised land. And that should be a reminder to all of us that that, you know, our good works, all of our good works are really nothing that we should be bragging or boasting about. It's because, you know, we've all failed in so many ways, and as Moses failed in what would seemingly be a small thing, right? A seemingly small matter. You know, small things are not necessarily as small as they seem to be to us, right? We would look at that, oh, you know, he struck the rock instead of speaking to it. Big deal, you know? But there's specific reasons why the Most High gives commandments that he does. And it was, in fact, a big deal. It was a very big deal because, not to get too far off into it, but Moses was supposed to be acting out prophecy. And he acted out prophecy incorrectly by not following the instructions he was given. And so what may seem to be a minor offense to us is not necessarily all that minor. So disobedience has major consequences, and that's something we should always keep in the forefront of our minds, because even with all of the good works that Moses did, he still had to pay the piper, right? So,
yeah, I feel for Moses in that regard. I do understand the severity of his decision. But seeing what he dealt with Israel through that entire ordeal, right? All the murmuring and bickering and complaining and just giving him a difficult and hard time. And then to be put in various, me personally being put in various leadership positions throughout my life, both in the military and outside of the military, it's really hard to lead a large body of individuals. It's difficult. You got to manage. You have to, set the example. You have to make sure that, whatever the rules or the laws are, that they're enforced, that you're not showing partiality to people, that you're, letting them know that you're a leader that they can count on and that they can come to you with whatever they have. So you're dealing with all of these different facets at once. And Moses, has been put in this position, and he's just been dealing with this rebellious generation, right? And then he gets so fed up to the point where he just snaps, and that one lack of judgment caused him to not be able to enter into the land that he was preparing Israel this entire time to enter into. So I do feel for him. I understand there's consequences for your actions, but I was like, man. No, I identify with Moses a little bit. So.
He will get to see the land eventually. So
yeah, eventually. So not to put anybody else on the spot, but if you guys have anything in regards to the Torah portion, or any questions or anything regarding the Torah portion, you go ahead and ask it now. I know you guys didn't have the time to read the chapters before we covered it. It gets finished. But,
all right. So through this week, the Torah portion will be Genesis 1:1 through 6:8. And there is also a reading from the prophets and from the New Testament. So we've got to let everyone know again, Genesis 1:1 through 6:8. And the segment from the prophets is Isaiah 42:5 through 43:11. And then the New Testament portion is John 1:1 through 14. So that'll be the reading for this week. And then then next week we'll have a brief discussion on that, and anything that anyone finds interesting they can bring up.
All praises. We definitely do that. Please chime in, because I don't want to just be reading all of this on my own. It's like 10 pages.
It happens to be that I just studied this last week, and I was studying using lexicon to get a full understanding of the new moon. So this is awesome that you're doing this.
Hey, you see, all praises. You see how the Holy Spirit just
isn't that how it often works, that someone will be studying something and then someone else will bring it up, even without even having prior knowledge to it, because I had no idea that you were studying this.
Yeah, I didn't know either. I had been working on this, but I didn't know that this is what we were going to do. So that was the Ruach for sure. So new moon, is it the full moon or not? We don't know. So in here on Truth Talk Radio, you guys know we always give you what we believe first. We don't unlike some platforms, they like to wait until the end to reveal what their stance is on something. We tell you up front, right? And so it'll, my stance is obviously going to be in here. You'll see it, and then we'll go through the rest of it. But in a spirit of full transparency, I must say that in the past, I did not follow the full moon as the sign of New Moon Day. However, recently the topic resurfaced, like I said earlier in the little disclaimer, right? So going into Enoch chapter 78, like I said, there was a degree of uncertainty which called for further study. So at this point, although I was convinced the new moon was the sliver, I owed it to scholarship and a seeking of knowledge to re-examine the scriptures to get a final conclusion. Here is a brief breakdown of the evidence I found on this matter. So our first stop, we're going to go and look at the actual words. So sis say you was doing a study and using a lexicon. There's right on here. We're looking at the words. So new moon is Strong's Concordance number 2320. It's Chodesh or Kodesh, however you choose to pronounce it.
I believe it's pronounced Chodesh, like a ch.
Oh yeah, all of that. Yeah, that's great. my pronunciation is super American.
Mine probably is too. So I mean,
Chodesh. All right, so it means new moon. That's the first definition. It also means a month. And it's from Chodesh or Chodash or Chadash. Did I get it right? I did.
Yeah,
No?
yeah.
Uh, which also means new moon, a month. And well, no, this isn't what that means. This is still the definition for here. We're gonna get into this a little bit later. This word specifically is a part of the study, but it comes as month, months and months, month throughout the months, new moon and new moons. And if you come down under the Brown Driver Briggs, so I got this blew up so big that it's moving slow. New moon, it says day, time of new moon as religious festival. Okay. And this is found in 1 Samuel 20 and 5 and verse 18, 24, 27, and 34. This 1 Samuel chapter 20 itself, this talks about it having there being 2 new moon days actually. So if you're interested in that study, we did cover that study at a different Shabbat talk. I'll probably put that link in here too. But for now, let's keep going. The second, it says it's a month as beginning the new moon, a lunar month. So we see that new moon is both a religious festival or holy day, as well as the beginning of a biblical month. It is also synonymous with the word month because the word can also mean a month. This is going to be very important to understand this right here. Keeping this in, keep this in mind throughout the rest of the study. Right? It's also synonymous with the word month, and it can also mean a month because there's going to be some dual contextual understandings that's going to happen, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So the root word is Strong's Concordance 2318, Chadash, and that means to renew, to repair. See it again here: renew, repair, renew, repair. Renew, renewed, repair, restored, restored, renew, repair. When we go down, a primitive root, to be new, causatively to rebuild, renew, repair. And this is going to play a role in it as well. As we know, when you're looking into the Hebrew, the actual Hebrew definition is important, but the Hebrew language is phonetic, but it's also pictorial as well. And so the individual words have meanings and the individual letters have meanings. So the root word, which is the portion of the Hebrew language that the actual word that you're using or looking for derives from, it plays a part in its meaning, right? So it's important to look at whatever the root word is. If you're looking into a word, if it has a root word, pay attention to it, because that root word's definition and meaning plays a part in the actual word's definition and meaning. So the root word of new moon, Chodesh, is the word Chadash, which means to renew or rebuild. Now check this out. A full moon doesn't need to renew or rebuild because being full, it is already considered built. However, an empty moon, void of light, needs to be both renewed and rebuilt. So throughout the first half of the month, it gains light, which we will get into later, to become fully illuminated or full. That is the renewing / rebuilding process. So let's take our next stop to Sirach or Ecclesiasticus 43 verses 6 through 8. And it says, he made the moon also to serve in her season for a declaration of times and a sign of the world. From the moon is the sign of feasts, a light that decreaseth in her perfection. The month is called after her name, increasing wonderfully in her changing, being an instrument of the armies above, shining in the firmament of heaven. So the moon is a sign for the appointed times or seasons that you read. This word season is appointed times and gives light in the heavens or the firmament. It says that the light increases here. It increases wonderfully, and decreases, a light that decreases in her perfection. This is true as we observe the various phases of the moon's cycle. So real briefly, the scriptures was just talking about how the moon behaves. And we can confirm this with scripture, but we can also confirm this with observation. When you go outside in the nighttime, you see the moon in its various phases and how it operates. And we'll get more into the phases, but just know that for a portion of the month, the moon gains light, and for a portion of the month, the moon loses light. And in between those two portions that I mentioned, you have the various phases that will dictate where we observe the beginning of the month and our 4 consecutive Sabbaths for each biblical month. All right, so next we'll discuss Psalm 81:3. And it says, blow up the trumpet in the new moon in the time appointed on our solemn feast day. So right here, the word time appointed mentioned above refers to the Hebrew word kasi or kaseh, meaning full moon. See the Strong's Concordance breakdown below. So this is actually talking about a full moon. So if we come down, kaseh, full moon, Strong's Concordance number 3677. Definition, full moon, right? So full moon, and also a full moon, even in the Brown Driver Briggs, right? Okay, so now because of this, people mistakenly understand this verse to be saying, and this is one of the reasons why people believe that the full moon is actually the new moon. It says, blow up the trumpet in the new moon, and then they add the understanding of which is in the full moon. That's how they read it, right? On our solemn feast day. However, that is not the context. There is a comma, this comma right here, after new moon, indicating that the new moon and the full moon are 2 distinctly different ideas. Other translations understand this without my added commentary, so you don't got to just take my word for it. The NASB, blow the trumpet at the new moon, comma, at the full moon, comma, on our feast day, right? So you have 4 parts. You got the blowing of the trumpet, and then you have the new moon, the full moon, and then on our feast day, all separate. Blow the trumpet at the new moon, comma, at the full moon, comma, on our feast day. This is the Amplified. Now there's way more than this, but for time purposes, I just pulled 2, but you can pull as many scriptures as you want, different translations. But the Amplified Bible, it had a footnote in it. And the footnote said, from Psalm 81:3, it says, or new moon, literally covering. For example, when the moon is covered or hidden. So when you're talking about a new moon, if it's being covered or hidden, is that really talking about the full moon? It also says, this was taken by the ancient rabbis to refer to the festival of the Jewish New Year, Rosh Hashanah.
I.e. the Feast of Trumpets.
I.e. the Feast of Trumpets. So we see multiple translations having this understanding, also separating the new moon and the full moon by a comma, indicating 2 different thoughts. The Amplified Bible also has a footnote next to full moon, which identifies new moon as a time where the moon is covered or hidden, i.e. without light, not full. Another thing to consider is that the footnote mentions Rosh Hashanah, Feast of Trumpets, which is a feast day on the first day of the 7th month, which also happens to be New Moon Day. Remember earlier I said, keep in mind those words synonymous, moon and month, is going to play a heavy role throughout this entire study. If the full moon was New Moon Day, then this feast should fall on the full moon, the 15th day of the month. Instead, however, it doesn't, which we will confirm later. This verse doesn't confirm the full moon as new moon, because we are instructed to blow the trumpet on both the beginning of our months as well as during our feasts, which we identified in Psalm 81:3, referring to the Feast of Trumpets. Lastly, before moving on, remember I mentioned earlier that Hebrew word for new moon, chodesh, can also mean month, as moon and month are synonymous. Well, Psalm 81:3 can also be contextualized as stating the following. Blow up the trumpet in the new month, comma denotes a separate thought, and in the full moon, comma denotes a separate thought, and in our solemn Feast of Trumpets or Rosh Hashanah, right? And another thing is, keep in mind when they were talking about the footnote, again, covering. If the moon is covered or is covering, it's hidden, that means you can't see it. And at the end of the month and right before the next month begins, the moon is unrecognizable. You can't see it because it doesn't have any light. So I just want to continue and make that point. So a dual context, both correct, as a new moon is a new month, right? We know that word can mean month in both meaning and chronologically as it pertains to a calendar day. So it can be a new month, but it can also mean a calendar day, which is the first day of the month, which is New Moon Day. And we have already confirmed that new moon is a holy day or religious festival. So either way you slice it, it is difficult to ignore this connection, especially when you also consider numbers 10 and 10. So in numbers 10 and 10, it says, also in the day of your gladness and in your solemn days and in the beginnings of your months, ye shall blow with the trumpets over your burnt offerings and over the sacrifices of your peace offerings, that they may be to you for a memorial before your Elohim. I am the Most High, your Elohim. So it's saying your day of gladness, that's Strong's 8057. Simcha, which means to exhibit joy or gladness in relation to celebrating or participating in sacred religious festivities. This would be associated with the feast days, Sabbaths, or new moon days. Next, it mentions solemn days, right? In your solemn days, or feasts or holy days. And lastly, in the beginnings of your months to blow the trumpet. In the beginnings of your months. This word months is the same word, Chodesh, that we see again, that we're supposed to blow the trumpets. So now if these witnesses are insufficient, let us continue to examine into the scriptures and the rest of Psalm 81, verses 4 through 7. Well, not the rest of the chapter, but just a few other verses.
Hey, I just want to say, bro, really good job on this. you getting really good into this, man. I'm thoroughly enjoying it.
Oh,
yeah, dude.
I know. You got any comments, Professor S, on this?
No, other than you did a really good job so far. It's great.
All right. It's gonna get good. It's gonna get real good. Okay, so Psalm 81, verses 4 through 7, it says, for this was a statute for Israel and a law of the Elohim of Jacob. This he ordained in Jacob for a testimony when he went out through the land of Egypt, where I heard a language that I understood not. I removed his shoulder from the burden. His hands were delivered from the pots. Thou calledest in trouble, and I delivered thee. I answered thee in the secret place of thunder. I proved thee at the waters of Meribah, Selah. So it says, this is referring to the observance of New Moon Day and the practice of blowing the trumpets on both the new moon and the full moon. Talking about verse 3, okay? Being established as a law. And here we go into beginning of the verse 4. Remember, it said this is a statute, okay? This law was prevalent during the time of Joseph in the land of Egypt, where the Most High delivered him from death and removed his burdens. If you remember the story of Joseph, he was sold into slavery by his brothers. He dealt with a whole bunch of adversity, ended up rising to prominence and being the savior of Israel by storing up the food and, keeping everybody safe during the famine. But this is also a reference to the land of Egypt itself, because the waters of Meribah was where the Israelites complained in the wilderness after the Most High delivered them from Egypt and removed their burdens of servitude. So Because of this direct link, the text could be understood as serving a dual purpose. The secondary purpose personifies Israel itself, regarding being led out of Egypt, being delivered, and having its burdens removed during the great exodus of Moses. This will become more apparent to the discussion of new moon being a full moon or not when we examine Numbers chapter 33. But for now, let's look at the significance of Meribah. And I just went to Google and typed in Meribah. Well, I typed in what the text said about Meribah. And this was the search results, pulled up the map. It's a little blurry. It's all right. But it says the waters of Meribah was the name given to the scene of strife. The incident is referred to in Numbers 20 and 24 and Deuteronomy 32 and 51. Meribah Kadesh, the King James Version, Meribah Kadesh, the Revised Version, British and American, Meribah of Kadesh, in Psalms 81 and 7, the Most High appears as having tested Israel here. And then it says, what happened at the waters of Meribah? At Meribah, probably in the area of Kadesh Barnea, Moses addressed the complaining people as rebels and struck a rock twice in anger, whereupon water flowed forth from the thirsty people. And we were just talking about Moses when we in the Torah.
Just talking about that. Interesting how that would come up.
How that would come up. See, the Ruach, I'm telling you, it's the Ruach. Yeah. It's the Ruach. Yeah. All praises. So that's the connection of Meribah, and it's significant when we continue going on. So let's examine the book of Numbers. So this is Numbers 33, 1 through 3. These are the journeys of the children of Israel, which went forth out of the land of Israel with their armies under the hand of Moses and Aaron. And Moses wrote their goings out according to their journeys by the commandment of the Most High. And these are their journeys according to their goings out. And they departed from Ramses in the first month, on the 15th day of the first month, on the morrow after the Passover. The children of Israel went out with an high hand in the sight of all the Egyptians. Okay. This scripture notes that the children of Israel went out with a high hand in the sight of all the Egyptians. So Israel left Egypt on the 15th day of the first month, on the day after the Passover. Now we know that New Moon Day is the beginning of the month, not the 15th of the month. So how could the full moon be considered new moon if scripture tells us that Israel left Egypt on the 15th day, which is a full moon, we know, but new moon is the first day? They would have had to leave Egypt on the first day of the month for the full moon to be considered New Moon Day. This is why Psalm 81 verses 4 through 7 is a significant clue regarding the new moon versus the full moon. And so finally, let's look at the book of Enoch, which started the whole scriptural debacle. Enoch verses 6 through 8. This is where it's going to get interesting. So bear with me and be patient. If you get confused at any point, let me know and I will slow it down, or I will reiterate and explain whatever we need to do. But I tried to break this down as easy as I could, because it can, at first read, it can be really confusing. So verse 6 says, and when the moon rises, it appears in the sky and has a half of a seventh part of light. And on the 14th day, it makes all its light full. So the moon rising means that the light is gradually gaining or growing. So it begins with only 1/2 of a seventh part, or 1/14th part of light, a very small amount of light in the beginning of the month. So did y'all get that? So if it's 1/2 of a seventh, so if it's 1/2 of a seventh, you just multiply that by 2. That's how you get one whole number, and then 7 times 2 is 14. So 1/14th. And that's a small, very small amount of light. That's the first sliver of light that we know starts the month. But for this purpose, we're going to read this entire chapter, because the chapter Enoch 78, you got 1/2 that could be read as the full moon if you don't really understand what's going on, and you got another half that could be read as the sliver, if you know what I'm saying. So it's important to read both of them in context. Verse 7, it says, and 15 parts of light are transferred to it until the 15th day its light is full, according to the sign of the year, and amounts to 15 parts. And the moon comes into being by halves of a seventh part. So from the beginning of the month to the time when the moon becomes full, 15 parts of light are transferred or added to the moon to make it full. This is the process of the renewing or rebuilding that we mentioned earlier. Keep in mind, the method of measuring light is by 1/2 of 1/7 parts, which is 1/14, and I just explained that. So verse 8, and that's why it's important, because verse 7 says, and 15 parts of light are transferred to it. Each of these 15 parts of light are in the measurement of this. This is the measurement that they're using to keep the light. So verse 8, this is what really threw me off before when I read it. It says, and in its waning on the first day, it decreases to 14 parts of its light. And on the second day to 13 parts, and on the third to 12 parts, on the fourth to 11 parts, and on the fifth to 10 parts, and on the sixth to 9 parts, and on the seventh to 8 parts, and on the eighth to 7 parts, and on the ninth to 6 parts, and on the 10th to 5 parts, and on the 11th to 4 parts, on the 12th to 3, on the 13th to 2, on the 14th to half of a seventh part. And all the light that remains from the total disappears on the 15th day. I know that was confusing, so no worries. So once the moon is full, the next day or the first day after becoming full, it begins to wane or lose light until the end of the month in this fashion. So everything that we just read in chapter 8, and that's why I had them all color coded differently to identify the different days. What I did is I made a chart and I mapped out the chart to show you like a visual representation of what that verse is saying. Because I know reading that verse at first glance is kind of difficult. I understand that the wording Enoch uses can be confusing. So keep in mind the day count in verse 8 isn't regarding the month count. It is strictly referring to the phases of the moon and the amount of light as it relates to each day after becoming full in the middle of the month. So basically, it's not counting day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, all the way to day 29 as in a calendar. It's not talking about that. It's talking about once the moon gets full, then it's starting its count, because the count is showing you how it's losing its light until the end of the month when all the light is gone, right? And I'll show you right here. It says, and all the light that remains from the total disappears on the 15th day. And in its waning on the first day, not the first day of the month, but the first day after it's full. Because remember, in verse 7, it wasn't talking about the beginning of the month. It was talking about, and 15 parts of light are transferred to it until the 15th day. So we've already covered from the first day to the 15th day. So verse 6 and verse 7 really gets you to day 15. Verse 8 is taking you from day 15 to the rest of the month, if that makes any sense. I hope that makes sense. If you get confused, anybody just say something. Just go ahead and say something. But here's the breakdown. So the first day of the month, the moon has very little light. We understood that from verse 6. The second day to the 14th day, the moon gains light until it's completely full by 14 out of 15 parts of light. And that is in verse 7. Now, verse 8 starts, and it tells you from the 15th day, the moon is full and now begins to lose light all the way to the end of the month. And that's in verse 8. So here we go. The first day, which is actually day 16, because we're counting from day 15, right? So the first day after day 15 is day 16. And this is what it's explaining. So the first day, which is day 16, it loses light and decreases to 14 parts of light. The second day, which is day 17, it loses light and decreases to 13 parts. So each day, the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, you're adding the day, because these are the calendar dates, but these are the days that it's losing light. So as this number increases, this number is increasing, but it's going from the middle of the month, basically. So the third day, which is the 18th, it loses light and decreases to 12 parts. So as these numbers increase, these numbers, the parts of light decreases because it's losing light each day. So the fifth day is day 20. It loses it down to 10. Sixth, which is the 21st day, it loses down to 9. And so on and so forth. You see the pattern. I don't have to beat a dead horse until you get towards the end of the month, which is, scripture said it was 14. It took 14 days, right? But it said the 13th day, which is day 28, it loses light and decreases to 2 parts. And then the 14th day, which is the 29th day of the month, and a biblical month is either 29 or 30 days long. In this case, it's 29 days. This is the last day of the month. It loses light and decreases to a half of a 7th parts of light, or what you'd call 1/14th part of light. That small little bit of light. And then that little bit of light goes away. And then the next biblical month begins, which is New Moon Day, where the first sliver of light starts to gain on the moon again. So on 30-day biblical months, there is an additional day that the moon has no light, or is considered what you call a dark moon, which is also observed as the first of a 2-day new moon observance. And like I said earlier today, if you want to see the study of the 2 new moon days, you can go and check that out. I'll probably add that to this as well. But continuing on, for a visual representation of this phenomenon, and I put the link in there, but we're just gonna pull this up.
I actually loved your breakdown on that, because those verses are very wordy. They're very wordy.
Very.
And it can be overwhelming. When it talks about, the half of the 7th, right? So it's like that's 1/14th. But like when you just read it, it's overwhelming. You're like, what? Oh, So. Mm-hmm. Breaking that down the way you did was very good, man.
All praises. Because if I get confused, then I know other people get confused. So I just be I'm simple, man. I try to keep it as simple as possible. Moon app on my phone. Shout out to the Boreal for this.
I've got the same one, actually.
Oh, all praises. Look at that. So in this app, you can literally slide your finger across the screen, and it'll go throughout the days, but it'll show you the moon's phases in each of the days, and you'll see how it gains light. You'll see the percentages of the illumination and everything, and it's a really good tool to use. So I highly recommend you, if you are interested in trying to really understand the moon's phases, this is a really good tool to have. But I'll play this real quick.
All right. So it's showing a full moon right now. The reason why it's showing this full moon is because today is the 2nd Shabbat of the 7th month, which is also Feast of Tabernacles. Okay. Illumination, 100%. So going to Enoch chapter 78, I learned that the first half of the chapter is explaining specifically how the light works, and the second half of the chapter is explaining a brief overview of how the light works on the moon. So let's start with the second half of the chapter, and then the first half will explain it. So verse 11, this is Enoch 78, verse 11. It says, during all the period during which the moon is growing in her light, she is transferring it to herself when opposite to the sun. During 14 days, her light is full in heaven. And when she is ablaze throughout, her light is full in heaven. So it says there's a period of time in which the moon grows her light. She's transferring it to herself when she's opposite the side of the sun during 14 days. So after 14 days, her light is full. We are at a full moon. So this verse 11 is describing right now what you see on the screen. All right. Verse 12. And on the first day, she is called the new moon, for on that day the light rises on her. Okay. When you think of something rising, like a sunrise, is the sun already out in full ablaze, or is the sun's light just beginning to show? So a sunrise, we understand it as the light just beginning to show. So it's the same with the moon. This wouldn't be considered a new moon because the light isn't rising on the moon. In fact, according to the scriptures and according to our observance of the lunar cycles, the moon is going to start to lose light. So let's go to what actually a moon, light rising on the moon, looks like. So this is a completely dark moon. Light rising on the moon is this small sliver of light that you see on the right hand side. That small slither of light, that first notice of light, is new moon. It says, and on the first day, she is called the new moon, for on that day, light rises on her. Verse 13, she becomes the full moon exactly on the day when the sun in the west and from the east, she rises at night, and the moon shines the whole night through until the sun rises over against her, and the moon is seen over against the sun. So it says she becomes the full moon exactly on the day, right? So she has to become the full moon. She has to grow into the full moon. So it says, on the side whence the light of the moon comes out, there again she wanes until all the light vanishes and all the days of the month are at an end. So she has to gain light throughout the month for 14 days, boom, 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 until she gets back to a full moon. There again, there again, she wanes. Wanes means to lose light. To wane is to lose light. To wax is to gain light. To wane, so she loses light, right, for 14 days until she is empty, void of light, according to verse 14. And that means that all the days of the month are at an end. And that makes sense because when the moon's light begins to rise again, that's new moon day, because it says, and on the first day, she is called the new moon, for that day light rises on her. All right. So now that we have that brief beginning and example, let's go to the first half of the chapter. So the first half of the chapter regarding the light of the moon actually begins at verse 6. Verse 6. It says, and when the moon rises, 1/14th part appears in heaven, and on the 14th day the moon's light becomes full. 1/14th part, that's when the moon is first visible. That's what you see here, this small little sliver of light, right? This small little bit of this itty bitty light. Itty bitty light, right? Okay, verse 6. Verse 7 says, and 15 parts of light are transferred to her until the 15th day when her light is full. Okay, transferred to her means the light is gaining. Remember in verse, where is it at? Verse 11, it says, when the moon is growing in her light, she is transferring it to herself. So she's transferring or growing the light. So the moon itself is a light all by itself. It's not requiring the sun. It grows in light. So verse 7 says, and 15 parts of light are transferred to her until the 15th day of the month. So for 14 days, light is growing or being transferred into the moon until the 15th day, which is a full moon. Okay, and keep reading. And 15 parts of light are transferred to her until the 15th day when her light is full. So the light is full. According to the sign of the year, here it goes. And she becomes 15 parts. And the moon grows by an additional 14 parts. So it's just giving an overview of what we just saw. For 14 days, it grows in light until the 15th day. Now, verse 8 says, and as the moon's waning, that word waning, right, means that it's now going to lose light. And as the moon's waning decreases on the first day, not of the first day of the month, but the first day after the moon becomes full, okay? First day to 14 parts of her light. So on the first day, it's going to lose 14 parts of her light. And then on the second day, down to 13 parts. And on the third day to 12. On the fourth day to 11. On the fifth day to 10. On the sixth day to 9. And so on and so forth, each day losing light throughout the rest of the month, until it says in verse 8, the ending of verse 8 says, and all her remaining light disappears wholly on the 15th. And once all the light is gone off of her, what does it say at the bottom? New moon, because the light is going to start rising again to start the next biblical months. And then verse 9 says, and in certain months, the month has 29 days and once 28. So, with that being said, family, I hope you have a much better understanding of the lunar cycles, how light gains and loses on the moon, and what truly new moon day is in relation to full moon, that they are not the same. Full moon is not new moon. New moon is when there is no light, and then it's the first sign of light. And the full moon is when the moon is fully and 100% illuminated. Thank you.
So is empty moon a term that came from somewhere else?
You said empty moon?
Yes. Y'all never heard of that term?
It doesn't say, it doesn't classify it as empty moon. It says that the moon is empty, void of light. That's where you get empty moon or dark moon from. When the moon doesn't have any light, it's empty because it doesn't have any light in it, and it's dark. It's the dark moon. It's the opposite of the light. You can't actually see it. If you go out at night and you look up in the sky, you won't be able to see the moon during that period of time.
And so how I take that, when the moon is empty, that's the last day of the month.
Correct.
So then how do we get, because it seems very specific as far as how it wanes and waxes on the 14th of a part. So how do we know that some months are 29 and some are 30 days?
You said, how do we know?
Right. How do we get that if it seems to be this, according to what you just read, it seems like it's going to be the same every month. On the 15th day, it's going to be full, and then it wanes by a 14th of a part for 14 days, and on the 15th day, it will be empty. Like that sounds like it should be the same every month.
That will be the same every month, but on a 30-day biblical month, you're going to have an entire day where there's no light, that the moon just stays dark for an additional 24 hours. So that lunar phase that you just saw, how the moon gains light and loses light, that doesn't change. It's just, is it a 29-day month or is it a 30-day month? If it's a 29-day month, then once the moon runs out of light, that very next day, you're going to see light come in again. And that's new moon day. On a 30-day month, once the moon loses all of its light, it's going to be an additional day of no light. And then you're going to see on the following day, the light begins, which is new moon day, to start the next biblical month.
And that has to do with the lunar cycle, how it's 29 and a half days. So you can't have half a day in a month. So what, depending on, with it being 29 and a half days, it'll eventually, 1 month will be 30 days, the next month will be 29 days. And it's usually every other month. It does vary. It does vary. There are exceptions to it, but no month is ever longer than 30 days. Some months are 29 days.
Yeah, normally it's 29-30, 29-30, but then you might have a period of time where you might have two 30-day months back to back, and then
or two 29-day months back to back,
or two 29-day months. Yeah.
Okay, so as far as you all know, Like, do we know which of the Hebrew months it is? You know, like in the Gregorian calendar, we know August has 31 days, and you know that's always gonna be the same.
Well, the particular month, it doesn't necessarily, like for example, the first month, it could be a 29-day month or a 30-day month. It's not predetermined which month has which amount of days. That's by the moon phases.
Yeah. So like on a Gregorian calendar, here's a good example. So on a Gregorian calendar, if you added a day to one of the months, right, it'll slide everything else back. It'll push everything else to the right. So if, let's just say on like a leap year where February has 29 days instead of 28 days, right? In that situation, if February has 29 days, that means March can't start until after the 29th day. So if it was like, if February 28th was a Friday and February 29th was a Saturday, then March 1st couldn't be until that next Sunday, because it's all revolving around the numerical order of how the months work on a Gregorian. On the biblical calendar, you're each month itself is isolated because it's revolving around when new moon day starts. So the lunar cycle will tell you when that month starts. So even if a month is 29 days or 30 days, it's not affecting the other months. It's not pushing the other months back,
or the day of the week.
Months don't start until, or the day of the week. Those months don't start until new moon day starts. So whether there's a 29-day or 30-day month, the numerical count for the next month doesn't begin until new moon day. So if new moon day hits, that is the first day of the month, and then you have your first day of the work week for 6 straight days and your 7th-day Sabbath, which is the 8th. So if it's a 29-day month and the next day is new moon day, all right, well, we're observing new moon day, and then the following day is your first day of your work week. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th-day Sabbath. Even if it's a 30-day biblical month, the 29th is your final Sabbath, right, of the previous month. Then the 30th is a dark moon. You can't see it. That is observed as day 1 of a 2 new moon day cycle. So it's a dark moon. You observe new moon day. And then the following day, which is day 2 of the 2-day new moon cycle, that's when the light starts. You observe that as new moon day as well. And then the following day is your first day of the work week. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-day Sabbath. There's no disruption in the order, regardless of the days of the month, whether it's a 29-day month or 30-day month.
Wait, hold on. I'm sorry. I'm gonna have you back up to something you said. The last example you were talking about, were you making an example of when there are 2 moons with no light?
This last example?
No, and you're speaking like your example that you were just talking about. Because you mentioned dark moon. What are you calling that? Is that the last? Yeah. What are you referring to in dark moon? Is that going to be the last day of the month when there is no light? The 15th day of waning.
No, the 15th day of waning will be the 29th. It's the last sliver, which is Shabbat, and then that light goes out. And then it's dark for a period of time on a 29-day month. And then the very next day, the light is shining back, it's starting back again to start the next month. On a 30-day month.
Wait. No, I don't want to move on yet. Please. So on the 15th day, according to the verses that you put in there, there should be no light in the moon. On the 15th day of waning, there is no light, no sliver, no light.
At the end of the 15th day.
Oh, the end of the 15th day?
Yes.
When you have the sunrise, the sun goes down, the moon is present. When the sun goes down, the moon is present. When the sun goes down, that is the end of the day. right?
It's the end of the day period. Yes.
Okay, so it is the end of the day. When the end of the day comes on the 15th day after essentially I would say on the 30th month day. So it says, okay, let me back up. On the 15th day of the month, the moon is full. We have a full moon on the
Yes.
15th day of the month.
Yes.
Okay. And so then it says on the first day of waning, which is day 16, and then he continues to go on the second day of waning, which is day 17.
Right.
All the way to, it says the 5th day of waning, the 15th day of waning.
Which is the 29th.
There is no light. Is it the 29th? Okay, there is no light.
Yeah. Because you have, think of it like this. You have 14 days on the front end, 14 days on the back end, and the middle is the 15th day.
Okay.
So you have one portion of the day where it's full illumination. So it's gaining light for 14 days, and then it's losing light for 14 days.
Okay.
And the way the moon operates, it's a revolving system. So it's not like a clock where it's like click clock. It's smooth. It's not stopping. The illumination on the moon is a revolving flow. So on the 29th day, by that time, the light is almost out. It's almost out. So technically on the 28th day at nighttime, you're looking up at the sky, and that is letting you know that the next day is going to be Shabbat because you see a sliver. Then the next day, you're actually observing Sabbath or Shabbat during the day portion. But just because the sun is up during that day portion, the moon is still operating. It's still losing light. That's why the night of the 29th, you look up in the sky and you don't see anything, right? Because the moon has already lost its light. It doesn't stop because the sun is out. It's constantly revolving.
Can you pull up your chart real quick while you're explaining this?
Pulling up the calendar?
Yes, please. Your chart that you wrote according to the Book of Enoch.
Oh, okay. Yeah, 1 second.
Okay. All right.
First day.
And decrease to 6. Okay. Go to the back half of your chart.
Okay.
Like going down to the ends. 3 parts of light. Okay. So 14 days to 29. It loses light and decreases to half of a 7th part of light.
Which is the 1/14th.
So it still has some light. So then if on the 30th day, you said a month will have 29 or 30 days, not 30 or 31.
Correct. 29 or 30.
So in this, what you have written, we're assuming that this month has 29 days?
The month that we're currently in right now, or are you talking about this?
Your chart.
This is describing a 29-day month.
So when the moon has no light, that is not a part of the month.
No.
What is that?
Has no light. So like that's why I gave the comparison between a 29-day month and a 30-day month. For a 29-day month, like this chart, right? It says on the 14th day of waning, which is day 29, it loses light to a small little part. So it's still got a little bit of light, but it's going out. That light is still going to be going out. The light doesn't stop. It's not like the light moves and then it stops and it waits for a new day and then it moves again. It's constantly moving throughout, right? When this light goes all the way out, it lets you know that the month has come to an end, meaning the end of the 29th day is the end of the month. Now, the beginning of the first day of the next month is new moon. That's when the light begins to go back into the moon. Now, that's just a 29 day month example. On a 30th day, a 30th month day, you have this same thing occurs. The same thing doesn't change. However, you have an additional day, which is the 30th day, where there is no light on the moon. It is for a full 24 hours, it is dark. And then it gets light. And that starts the next month, if that makes sense.
Okay, so how do you determine what the first? Okay, maybe you said it. What's the first day of the month then?
The first day of the month is
yeah. It's almost like my question is, well, what is the prompt? Are we prompted by what the last day of the month is to know what the beginning of the month is, or are we prompted by the beginning of the month to know what the beginning of the month is?
This is why we observe the feast days and Sabbaths and all of that by observance, right? And once you understand that the moon is a constantly revolving situation, is not fixed. It's not like, oh, you're gonna have this much on this day and this much on this day. Remember, a full day has 24 hours, and just as the clock goes around, the light goes around and it fills up the moon and then it goes out of the moon. So it's constant, right? It's like a flow, right? Now, with that being understood, like think of you shoot guns, right?
Yes.
Okay. If I said that if your target was moving, right, are you going to shoot where the target is, or are you going to shoot in front of the target where you think it's going to go?
Right. In front of it.
So keep that analogy in your mind when I say this.
Okay.
The way we observe new moon, or the way I do it, which I say is probably you're going to be the most accurate, is if you look up at the moon and you can't see it, that lets you know that it's a dark moon. It lets you know it's a dark moon, right?
Okay.
The next day, light will be gaining on the moon, regardless if you can see the light, because the sun is now out. When the sun's out, majority of the time when the sun is out, you can't see the moon. It's a very few instances where you can see the moon and the sun in the sky at the same time, but majority of the time you don't see that moon until that sun go down or start to go down, right? Yeah. So if you know, looking at the like percentages, so 0% of illumination is no light. 1% means there's light, but it's just a little bit. That 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is gonna keep going. That don't stop. So once it hits 0, just like I mentioned, the target, right? You ain't gonna shoot at the target. You're gonna shoot where it's gonna go. You treat the light the same way. So if you see a dark moon, that lets you know that the light is coming, and that the light will probably be gaining on the next day while the sun is out. So at that point, you observe new moon day, because that is the first day where where the light rises upon her in accordance with the scripture. It says, and she calls her new moon, for on that day light rises upon her. And in some variations, it says upon her face. So that's new moon. Now, if it's a dark moon, which you can't see, and the next day you look up and observe and you still can't see it, that lets you know that you had a 30-day biblical month. Does that make sense?
Okay, so I think
both those days you're going to observe new moon.
I think my first question, the answer probably should have been no, because I said when there is no light in the moon, that signifies the end of the month. Well, this seems not to be true, because some months you won't have a dark moon.
The moon, yeah, you will always have a dark moon, but you won't always have a dark moon for a full 24-hour period.
Okay. I'll have to just ponder on it then.
Does anybody else have a question?
Can I just make a comment? I think what he's trying to say is that sometimes on the 28th, you'll probably just have one day of dark moon, and then you go sometime, not the 28th, the 29th, and then you go into the 30, where you can have 2 periods like of a dark moon. It's still the end of the cycle. It has the new moon hasn't started yet in that time until the first light appears again. Then that's the new moon. I don't know
Let
if
me,
it
let me
helps.
pull up. Let me pull up the calendar real quick. 1 second, and boom. Okay. So today is the 22nd day of the biblical month. Today is also October 6th. But we ain't worried about the Gregorian right now. We focus on the lunisolar. So today is the 22nd day of the biblical month, and it is the end of Feast of Tabernacles. Because you always start on a Shabbat and then you end it on a Shabbat, or you close it out. So today is a Shabbat, and now this is the third Sabbath of the biblical month. This month is a 30-day biblical month. So keep an eye on this illumination percentage as I go through the days. So on a 30-day biblical month, it went down, and you see the percentages are constantly going down. That means each day the moon is losing more and more light, but it's a revolving system. So, for this entire 24-hour period, it's losing light. For this entire 24-hour period, it's losing light. And you see the percentages continue to go down, right? On the 29th day, it says between 3% and 0%, because on the 29th day of the month, or what would be considered the last day of the month if it was a 29-day month, you're going to have a small little bit of illumination, but then it's going to go out on this day. All of this is going to happen. You're going to have 3% all the way to 0%. And this is going to be a sliver, and then it's going to be a completely dark moon, all within the same day, because this day for 24 hours, that 24-hour period is going to be losing light if this was a 29-day month. But since there's a 30-day month, there's no illumination. So for a full 24-hour period, the 30-day month will have no light. This lets you know that you are in a 30-day month with no light. You will observe this as a new moon day. It is like a pre-new moon day. And then the very next month is new moon day, because you see 0 to 2%. This is letting you know that light is now beginning to come into the moon for a full 24-hour period until the second day. And then you see the percentages start to increase for a full 14 days. 14 days of gaining light until the 15th. And then you have 100% of light. And it says 100% to 98 because also on the 15th day, it begins to lose light. And then for 14 days again, it's losing light. 14 days, it's losing light all the way until the end. And this is a 29-day month. So on the 29th day, you see a small percentage of light still left, because that's letting you know it's the final day of the month and the fourth Shabbat or fourth Sabbath of the month. And then it runs out of light. Then it becomes a dark moon. And then the very next day, the light begins to rise upon her. And this cycle does not change or stop. It's always going to be the same amount.
So by this logic, wouldn't that mean that on day 15 we should see the sun and the moon shining?
At the same time, yeah, you typically do on a full moon. The moon will rise while the sun's still up.
But it should be full of light.
Mm-hmm.
The moon, yes, full of light.
The moon's full of light, yes.
It depends on the atmosphere. Like if you got a cloudy day, if it's foggy, if you got a bunch of stuff going on up in the clouds, in the sky, sometimes you won't be able to see the moon. Because remember, going back to Genesis 1:16, I believe, it says the greater light is to rule the day, the lesser light is to rule the night. That means the sun shines brighter than the moon. So the light of the sun can overshadow or overcast the moon, and it's more difficult to see the light from the moon. Even though it's full, it's difficult to see that light. It's like if you have two flashlights. Or you have a flashlight and you take it outside in the middle of the day and you put it on, you ain't gonna really be able to see it like that because there's light all around already. So you can see a full moon, depending on the situation. So, in conclusion, my original understanding that the full moon is not the new moon stands. As we saw from the video as well as the text, the month begins when the new moon, as the light begins to build upon the face of the moon. Then for 14 days, it gains light until it's fully illuminated on the 15th day, which is the second Sabbath of the month. The remaining 14 days of the month, if it's on the 29-day month, right, the light will diminish and the moon will become completely empty with no light at the end of the month on the 29th or 30th day, as the next new moon day commences to begin the next biblical month. As the first sliver of light, or 1/14th part, or half of a seventh part, however you want to say it, restarts the entire lunar cycle. So again,
and it's
I know
it's analog. It's not digital, so it doesn't lose just 1% every day. It's analog. It's continually rotating, continually losing light, continually gaining, etc. It'll gain once it becomes full, then it starts losing until the cycle begins again, and it just back around.
Yep. So if this right here, if my hand is full moon, the point of the clock, so to speak, that it's full moon, this hand isn't going to stop at full moon. It's going to keep going. It's going to hit it, but it's going to keep going because it's a consistent flow. So the light's gaining, and full. And now it's losing. Does that make sense? Like, it's not like a clock where you see the second hand is like click, click, click. That's just our way of keeping it, right? That's our way of keeping the amount of time for a second. But the light on a like, if you speed up a clock and you look at it, you're not going to see any of this. You're going to see constant rotation because time is linear, meaning it's moving in one direction, it's flowing, it don't stop. The saying, time waits for no man, where the light on the moon waits for no man. So if I look up at the sky and it's a dark moon, right? If it's a 29-day month, I know the next day the light's already going to be there. I can trust that light's going to be there because I know the light don't stop and wait. It's going to continue to go. So when I wake up the next morning, waking up, and I look up at the sun, it's a beautiful morning. It's new moon day, because although I can't see the moon at that moment, the sun is up. I know that light is coming. It's that 0 to 1%, 0 to 1%, 1% to 2%. 2% to 3% kind of percentage. If you're talking illumination, I know that it's there. Now, if it's not there, that means that we're in a 30-day month and there's 2 days, or not 2 days, a full day of no moon. And then I know when I wake up, it's new moon day, the first one of 2. We're gonna party for a whole weekend. That's why when you keep the calendar, you have new moon day, your 4 consecutive Shabbats. So you have 5 days off from work, technically. If you're talking about working for somebody, you take 5 days off from work. On a 30-day month, you have the 4 Shabbats and 2 consecutive new moon days. So you get a 3-day weekend every other month, or however the 30-day month falls, because you have the 4th and final Shabbat, the 29th day of the month is a Shabbat, so that's off. The next day, which is a 30-day, the 30th day of a 30-day biblical month, which is new moon day 1. And then the following day, which is new moon day, the new moon day, the actual new moon day. And that's 3 days consecutively that you're off. That's another reason why it's really difficult to keep a standard job in this truth, keeping this calendar, because employers don't like to hear. They already don't like to hear the fact that you're going to be off for this particular month every Wednesday, and then next month is going to be every Thursday, and then next month it could be every Saturday, because it skips on the Gregorian. They don't like that, right? They want it to be consistent. Tell me what day you need off so I can put it in the schedule. You need Thursdays? Okay, every Thursday you're going to have off. I can work with that, but I'm not going to work with this day 1 month, the next day. It's too much for them to deal with. But then if you add on top of that, also in addition to those days off I told you, yeah, so I'm gonna need a 3-day weekend next month, and then I'll just have a standard 2-day weekend the following month. But then I'm gonna need another 3-day weekend the next month. Like, no, they not trying to hear that, So it's hard. It's definitely hard and difficult. That's why either owning your own business, working for yourself, establishing some type of residual income where you're making money and your money is making money for you. Those are the best. Those are the best situations where you don't have to worry about this being a conflict of interest, because you're not answering to anyone in those situations. But that's really all I have as far as the topic of tonight's lesson. That's all I got.
Did you already go over why the pre-new moon, why that is to be kept as the Sabbath?
Yeah, because Scripture tells us to observe the new moon, right? And then in 1 Samuel chapter 20, I mentioned it at the beginning of the presentation. You probably went on yet, but in 1 Samuel chapter 20, to give you a quick little synopsis, that's where David and Jonathan talking. David's like, your pop's trying to kill me. Jonathan's like, oh, I don't really believe you. I don't know. And David's like, look, I'm about to hide until the 3rd day. So I'm going to go out to the field. I'm going to hide until the 3rd day, because I'm supposed to have dinner with your pops, King Saul, on New Moon Day. So he says he's going to hide until the 3rd day. And so that is the conversation that they had, because they said tomorrow is New Moon. So that's day 0. The following day, which is New Moon Day, it says that David's seat was empty. So he didn't show up to dinner with Jonathan, I think Abner, and Saul, right? So those 3, he didn't show up to dinner. He was hiding in the field. King Saul didn't show up. He didn't say nothing. He said, I think he might be unclean. He might, something might have befallen him. He might be sick, or he might be unclean, whatever. Not a big deal. Saul wasn't tripping. The following day, which was day 2 of New Moon Day, because they were supposed to eat dinner and feast on New Moon Day.
That's when he's all like, "Oh, where's the son of Jesse? Where's?"
Yeah. That's when Saul gets to tripping, right? And then once he gets to tripping and he throws the javelin, and Jonathan realizes, like, oh snap, no, he really want to kill David. So now Jonathan's a believer. And they had already had a plan that Jonathan would warn David out in the field, and he would send somebody to go and shoot it, to pick up the arrow that he shoots. And if he says, if I shoot it beyond you, then you in danger. Don't come back. Just run, flee. If I shoot it before you, then that means it's safe. All is well. But once Jonathan realized that David was in danger because King Saul had snapped, then on the following day after the New Moon Day, Jonathan went out to the field. So now we're on day 3, because day 0 is Jonathan and David talking. Day 1 is the first dinner that he didn't show up to. Day 2 was the second dinner David didn't show up to. And then day 3 was the following day after the second dinner, where Jonathan went to the field, shot the arrow, and let David know that he was in danger. So David fled. And all of those dinner days were New Moon days. So even in the scriptures, we have biblical evidence of 2 New Moon days. And that's only possible on a 30-day biblical month, not a 29-day biblical month, because the 29th day of the month is already a Sabbath. And we know there's only 3 types of days. You have Sabbaths, you have work days, you have New Moon days. So, or you can consider a 4th day if you put a feast day in its own category. But a feast day is still, according to the scriptures, a holy convocation or Sabbath. Whether or not it lands on a Sabbath or it doesn't land on a Sabbath, like Day of Atonement, is still a holy convocation. So you have those classifications of days, and
you've got also Amos 8 verse 5, I think it is. Where it speaks of New Moon Day as a reference to not not buying or selling on that day. Let me just pull it up real fast. Or
When
you
will-
already have it.
Oh no, I don't have it over here.
So Amos 8, pretty sure it's 5. Let me see. Amos 8:5. It says, saying, "When will the new moon be gone, that we may sell corn, and the Sabbath, that we may set forth wheat, making the ephah small and the shekel great, and falsifying the balances by deceit." So what that's talking about is these wicked people who are ripping people off anyway. They're wanting to rip people off, and they're so anxious to rip people off that they're just like, man, when's the new moon going to be over so that we can sell our corn at a bogus price, right? Or when's the Sabbath going to be over so that we can sell our wheat, and rip people off, because they knew that on new moon and Sabbath these things didn't take place. The markets were not open on those days.
And also, can I add something real quick? In Isaiah 66, verse 23, it says, "And it shall come to pass that from one new moon to his new moon, and from one Shabbat to his Shabbat shall all flesh come to worship before me." So the new moon is a worship day also.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Absolutely.
And then you've also got Ezekiel, 43, 46, I think. That also illustrates it as well. So.
Yeah. There's plenty of examples in that same lesson for the 2 new moon days. We covered that in the beginning portion of it.
Mm-hmm.
Can I see your what you wrote for the definition of new moon days? You had new moon, full moon, somewhere written.
Except my definition of new moon day.
Did you write it down? Type it.
You talking about from the lexicon?
From your notes, like what you wrote. Then you write it, type it. Yeah, like you was reading it. I know at least towards the end when I came in, I'm pretty sure I saw it. What's you saying? It's before that. It was before your chart.
I think she's referring to the strong concordance that you wrote in the definition.
That's way at the top. Hold on. So new moon is both a religious festival or holy day, as well as the beginning of the biblical month. It's also synonymous with the word month because the word can also mean a month. Is this what you're talking about?
Right. That's right. Because I learned in my research or whatever, new moon is a translation for new month. And so that's why I think I'm kind of stuck when you were talking about the end of the moon phase, because to me it just doesn't seem like 2 new moons. You can't have 2 starts of a month. Either the month is going to be 29 or 30 days, and I'm not seeing how, if the month is 30 days when there's no moon, you treat it as a new moon and therefore it is a Sabbath. I don't see logically how that can be.
So the new moon is somewhat similar to a Sabbath, but it's not actually a Sabbath, right? Sabbath days and new moon days are completely different days, just as work days are different from Sabbaths and work days are different from new moons, right? They're different days. New moon is a specific classification of day. Work days are a specific classification, and Sabbaths are a specific classification. Each of them have their own what would be the word for it? Requirements, I'd say, for a lack of a better term. On work days, obviously, you work. Hold
on, we lost her. Hold on 1 second. She
dropped out.
Go ahead. Keep going.
Oh, okay. So they have different they're different classifications, and they all have their different requirements or regulations, right? The sacrifices that were done on New Moon Day, for example, were completely different from the sacrifices that were done on any of the regular work days or on the Shabbats. The Shabbats had different sacrifices that were done than on the work days, and etc. So each day is classified differently. Work days are not the same as Sabbaths, and they're not the same as new moons. New moons are not the same as work days or Sabbaths. And Sabbaths are not the same as new moons or work days.
Right.
To add on to that real quick, hold on. I can give like a visual breakdown of what he's saying. Hold on. Going back to the calendar. Right. Okay, so according to the scriptures, you have 6 working days and then a 7-day Sabbath. So you can never have more than 6 working days. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 days of work, 7-day Sabbath. In the entirety of the scriptures, you will never read that the Sabbath falls on any other day other than the 8th, the 15th, the 22nd, and the 29th day. These are fixed days, and there's our fixed work days. So, like he said, work days aren't Sabbaths, and Sabbaths aren't work days. You also have New Moon Day, which begins each month, and it is neither of these days as well. It's all separate. So it's its own type of day and its own classification. So are these, so are the work days. Now, not seven trumpets, World's Last Chance, who created this calendar, which is amazing, by the way, but they have the understanding that on a 30-day biblical month, which is right here, that this is, they call it a transition day, translation day, or intercalendrical day. And they call it it's a day in limbo in between a 29-day month and the following month. So they call it an extra day. Like if you look up here, they even classified it as a work day. This is not scriptural. This is not biblical, because you're supposed to have 6 consecutive work days and then a 7-day Sabbath. That messes it up. So if you're looking at a 30-day biblical month, okay, you got work day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Cool so far. 7-day Sabbath. Then you got a work day and then New Moon Day. That's not scriptural. That's not biblical. So this day, something has to be up with this day. And when you read, and remember, we've said this in the past, the people during the scriptures, they knew how to observe the heavens. They knew how to keep the calendar. So they didn't have to write specifically how to do it, because that was something that they already knew. So the observance of 2 new moon days isn't an instruction in the Torah, like on a 30-day month, the 30th day of the month is a new moon to you before the next day of which is also a new moon unto you. They don't have to say that, because they already understood that. They knew that already. And we can find that by looking at what they observed. And we see in 1 Samuel, we see an evidence of an observance of 2 consecutive new moon days. And in 1 Samuel, hold on, let me go to.
And a perfect example of that while he's pulling. Oh, you got it already. Never mind.
Yeah, I got it. I'm quick with the finger, bro. I'm quick with the finger. No, I'll just mess with you. So right here, this is the Strong's Concordance of the word new moon, right? So we come down, the context of new moon, day, time of new moon as a religious festival. 1 Samuel chapter 20, verses 5, 18, 24, 27, and 34. All of these verses uses the word Chodesh as new moon, not as a new month, as new moon day, the religious festival. So if you go to the actual text, let's pull it up. First Samuel chapter 20. All right, First Samuel chapter 20. It said hold on, let me pull this up. It said verses 5, 18, 24, 27, and 34, right? Okay. Verse 5. And David said unto Jonathan, Behold, tomorrow is the new moon, and I should not fail to sit with the king at meat, but let me go so that I might hide myself in the field until the third day at evening. Right? So this is new moon. Verse 5.
So you're saying he's not saying it is the beginning, the first day of the new month. He is not saying that tomorrow.
No, he's saying tomorrow is new moon day. New moon is the first day of the month, but he's talking about it's new moon. It's the new moon day in terms of the worship day. Tomorrow's a worship day because on every new moon, they all sit together and have a feast. They eat together. Mm-hmm. That was a part of the observance of new moon.
And you also find this in Judith. If you go into the Apocrypha, you'll find it in Judith that Judith, she fasted after her husband died. She fasted every day except for new moons, Sabbaths, and feasts.
She was eating. And that's when we said, like, typically according to the culture, they would fast. They would eat, fruits, veggies. They really didn't eat meat unless meat was a delicacy. They would eat meat on the Sabbaths and feast days and new moon days because that was when they would enjoy it. It was supposed to be a joyous occasion. Yeah. We eat meat every day. That's just the westernized American culture. Mm-hmm. But that's verse 5. The next one was verse 18. Then Jonathan said to David, tomorrow is the new moon, right? And thou shalt be missed because thy seat will be empty, right? So again, he's talking about new moon. Mm-hmm. 24. So David hid himself in the field, and when the new moon was come, again, we see the same word, new moon, the king sat him down to eat meat. Verse 27, and it came to pass on the morrow, which was the second day of the month. It says second day of the month in the KJV. However, we know from the context of which the word is being used, even verse 27 as well is referring to new moon as a religious festival. It's not talking about the calendar day. So although KJV says second day of the month, we know based on the context that this is the second day of new moon. The second day of new moon. That David's place was empty, and Saul said unto Jonathan his son, wherefore cometh not the son of Jesse to eat meat, neither yesterday nor today? That's when he started snapping. And then 34. So Jonathan arose from the table in fierce anger and did not eat meat the second day of new moon. Again, because according to here, it's these two are included. If these two verses, the verse 27 and 34 was talking about new moon in the context of just a new month, then these two verses wouldn't be listed here, right? They wouldn't be listed there. They wouldn't be, it'll just be verses 5, 18, 24. KJV just translated those last two verses as month. Because this entire chapter, the context is always in regards to the observance of the worship day of new moon, not talking about when the month is beginning or when the month isn't beginning. So all of that adds up to, yes, new moon day is the beginning of a biblical month. We know that. However, like I showed with the days, the 30th day of a month, it can't be a work day. It can't be a Sabbath. It can't be nothing but a new moon, because the new moon was the only time that they were able to worship back-to-back days. And there's additional commentary and other stuff in that lesson. I'm telling you that to save on time, like, you got to just go and check that one out, like, all the way through. We break it all the way down. It was highly understood among scholars that the Jews observed 2 days of observance for that time period. And
this goes to simply because there's not a direct commandment to it. It was in the cultural context. It was already understood, right? You've got to understand the audience that this was written for is people who already understand the culture, right? So, like, if I give you directions to go somewhere and I say go to the red light and then turn right, I don't have to explain, well, if it's red, you can turn right, but you can't turn left, or you can't turn straight. Or if it's green, you can just go. Or if it's yellow, you got to hurry through it, or you got to stop, or whatever. I don't have to explain that. If I say go to the stop sign and turn left, I don't have to say make sure you come to a complete stop, because that's what a stop sign means. It's already understood in our culture that you stop at a stop sign, and if the light's red, you stop.
I was just saying that part makes sense. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. So that's why you don't see like a commandment, thou shalt observe 2 new moon days. No, they already understood that. Just like in Genesis 1:14, right? In the KJV, all it says is he's put the lights in the firmament and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. That's it. That's all verse 14 says, right? So we go and we read it like, okay, signs, season, days, years. It's not until you look into the words where seasons isn't winter, summer, spring, fall. Seasons is your appointed times, your feasts. So if he gave us the sun and the moon for signs to guide as guides or direction, guides to what? Guides to the appointed feasts, and for our days and for our years, then you understand that that's a calendar system. But it doesn't say in Genesis 1:14, and the Most High gave us, and I'm talking about the KJV only, because like I said, I can pull out my Palestinian Targum, which is an older version of the KJV and a lot of the other versions, right? It's older than the Septuagint. It's older than the Sefer that a lot of people read. And if you read Genesis 1:14 in this, it's way more specific. But in the KJV, all you're getting is signs, season, days, years. So you gotta do some critical thinking to understand like that's a calendar. But in here, in this one, you go to Genesis 1:14, it says, and the Most High said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens, or the firmament, to distinguish between the day and the night, and let them be for signs and for festival times, and for the numbering by them the account of days, and for the sanctifying of the beginning of months and the beginning of years, the passing away of months and the passing away of years, the revolutions of the sun, the birth of the moon, and the revolvings of seasons. That's way more in depth. And this is the older version. So that's why I'm saying, like, we don't always have the amount of information that we should be having. And there's other texts that probably haven't been unearthed yet, or they're sitting in the Vatican's vault that they've been holding out from.
There's some locked away in some basement.
The best that we can with what we have, you know what I mean? If you playing spades and you only got one spade in your hand, but you got, ace of diamonds, a king of diamonds, ace of hearts, and then some other ones, and you count your books, you're like, this ain't really a strong hand, but I'm gonna get this book, I'm gonna get this ace off, I'm gonna get the book that way, I'm gonna get the other ace off, and that king might go, depending on how the hands look. You're gonna play the hand you dealt, and you just hoping that your partner got the rest, right? So it's just kind of like, if all you got is the KJV, if all you got is the NIV, you screwed. I'm sorry, you screwed. If all you got is the NIV, but if all you got is the KJV, then you just gotta do your best, And just like in Isaiah 58, right? In Isaiah 58, the KJV says, "Thou shalt not do thine own pleasure on the Sabbath." What people read, because they stuck on the KJV and they read "thine own pleasure," and then they take that as on a Sabbath day, it's a no fun zone. You can't do nothing that you love to do. But when you see the translation, thine own pleasure means conducting business, conducting your own affairs, striking a bargain. Specifically in the JPS Tanakh, it says striking bargains. So you're not supposed to go to work. You're not supposed to make deals on the Sabbath. It has nothing to do with doing the stuff that you love and enjoy to do.
Well, now here's the thing. If we were living in a perfect world, back then, and in the social structure back then, work wasn't drudgery to them because they were doing what they wanted to do. They chose their occupation. Right. And that's what they're doing. So they enjoyed doing it, right? I mean, these days people go to jobs that, they've got slave jobs and they don't want to work those slave jobs, but they feel like they have to because they got to pay the bills, right? So if you look at it in modern terminology, your occupation is not something pleasurable in general for most people, right? But back then it was like, oh, you get to choose what you want to do. I mean, if you like raising sheep, then you raise sheep. If you like tilling the ground, then you plant your fields, you know what I'm saying? And you enjoy doing that because there was something that you chose to do. It wasn't a drudgery. It was something you woke up and said, hey, this is gonna be a good day. Let me go and do this because it's something I enjoy doing,
I mean, I would contest that a little bit because you typically did what your parents did. Like,
but it was something you were accustomed to.
But that, I mean, you enjoyed it. Like, you didn't have a choice like we do today. We actually have a choice. Like, Yeshua was a carpenter because his father was. Not because he enjoyed it.
But you weren't obligated to do it. You
weren't obligated.
You could very well follow in the footsteps of your father, right? But you wasn't obligated. If he was a carpenter, that didn't automatically make you a carpenter. If that's something you wanted to do, that would be the easiest route because your he knows how to do it, so he can teach you. Mm-hmm. You living with him for all of your youth. You learning the business. So when you become an adult, it's easy to be a carpenter because that's the line. But if that's not something you want to do when you become of age, and you have your own household and you're running your own household, if you want to be a sheep farmer, go be a sheep farmer. Mm-hmm. You don't necessarily you weren't like locked into the occupation.
Yeah. I mean, generally people did do what their parents did, but that was because they observed their parents doing it and enjoying it, and they also enjoyed doing it because as a child you enjoy doing the things that your parents take you. You get fond memories of these things. So, like, if your father was a fisherman, you went fishing with him a couple times. You're like, oh man, this is so much fun, and then you went and become a fisherman. But let's say you didn't like fishing. Just because your father was a fisherman didn't mean that that's what you had to do. You could go on and any other type of business you wanted to do,
Yeah. Test and Cindy, y'all been quiet. I got to pick on you.
Listen, so far everything that you've said lines up with everything I studied, and actually was the first time I studied it for myself, and I don't know, it just lines up, and it goes along with what we've been doing. It's like I've been doing it for so long, listening to other people. You've even explained it to me. You called and explained it to us, and it's like, so doing the research and everything, it's like, I'm just happy that I'm doing it correctly now. You just verified that. That's awesome.
All praises. Was it anything during your study that you were able to find that I didn't have?
No, the very first thing you brought up was that word. I have problems with the two, Kodesh or Kadesh. I don't know if I'm saying it correct. It's like that was the very first thing I found when I was looking it up. It's like, and it explains the new month, and then it's like the understanding though of when the new month is, because it's like full moon is not new month. It's when it completely disappears, then it starts to come back. You covered everything that I've studied. I might have one other thing that I looked up, but I don't have my notes. I've been looking for them and I can't find them. But it was on the same subject. It was just in the lexicon, which might be a little different than what you used. I don't know. It refers to another reference in the lexicon. And it was pretty much the same thing, though.
Okay. Cool.
And now, to be completely fair, I have looked into the arguments for full moon, and on the surface, it does seem like it is plausible. But when you look at the full weight of Scripture and all of the evidence available, it becomes, in my opinion, in my personal opinion, undeniable that it is not full moon. But but to be fair, to be fair, it does. There is some seeming evidence to support full moon, and I don't, I still there's several brothers and sisters that I know that observe full moon as new moon, and I love them, and that's that's what they're convicted of, so it's not anything like, oh, look, they're, it's not like that.
Yeah, I agree with you.
It's kind of like the biblical day. Does it beginning evening? Does it beginning morning? There's a couple scriptures you can read that'll make you think it's the evening, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at the whole totality of scripture, like the 130 scriptures we went through that talk about the morning, that scale ain't just it don't line up. So
yeah.
But praises.
It does say, though, am I correct on this? It does say, though, that on some feast days it starts from evening. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
Okay.
But those are those specific feast days, and it's only two.
Okay.
Passover and Day of Atonement.
Okay.
Those are only two. Right?
Yeah.
The Passover starts the evening of the 14th and it rolls into the 15th, which is Feast of Unleavened Bread. And then Day of Atonement, which is the 10th day of the 7th month, you start it on the evening of the 9th. So on the 9th day at evening, you start fasting to clean out your body and clear out your tummy, your belly, mm-hmm. Right? And then on the 10th day, your system is emptied out. So you fast for the 10th day,
mm-hmm.
Right? So that's why those are the only two that start.
And
people read those and they apply it to every day.
Mm-hmm.
Every day.
But thank you for that.
Yeah, no problem. I appreciate your input, sis. Andrea, you've been on point. Jump right on in. I love it. I love it when you ain't shy. You like, yeah, but also in the scripture right here, it says, I love that. Keep it going.
Thank you. It was awesome. Really, really awesome teaching. And I'm really enjoying it. Thank you.
All praises. Well, let me go ahead and get this banner. So y'all already know where we going with it. If you like the content, like, share, comment, and subscribe. I always forget, so I got to make sure. I had to make a banner and put it in here. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. If you like these lessons, these presentations, you can definitely check them out here on the website. On the channel. And if you need any other things, you can go to the website, which has some of these teachings. You have access to the whole platform, but you also have access to other things as well. And lastly, if you want to support the platform, go ahead and make a donation to, you know what I'm saying, Zik Hash Out.
Yeah, and don't forget, everyone, to read through the Torah portion for next week so that we can discuss that.
Yes. Sorry, I know everybody hates homework, but Genesis chapter 1, what's it, 1 through
6:8, and then
1 through 6:8. Yeah, okay.
And then Isaiah 42, verse 5 through 43, verse 11, and John 1, verse 1 through 14.
Actually, I love homework, and it'll give me an opportunity to read beforehand. And if I have any questions or anything, because normally I have a ton and then I can't think of them spur of the moment, I can write it down.
Yeah, write them down, and also see how the Torah portion relates to the segment from the prophets and from the New Testament. So
okay, thank you.
Yeah. So you got a whole week. So
awesome.
Whole week. Check it on out. But with that being said, family, I appreciate y'all. Love you. May the Most High bless you, keep you, camp His angels around you, and give y'all shalom.
Yes.
Shabbat shalom, family.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
And we going out on my song. I told y'all I was going to hit y'all before we leave.
Ups and downs, they keep me balanced, helps me stay on my feet. All that I have is all I need. Until I have more, what's mine is for me. I'm happy to say that I'm never in need. I limit my wants because they make me compete. They say, you good? I say yes. How have you been? I say blessed. They say I come up on some hard times. Then you got me say less. I'm just cut from a different cloth. You can't stitch me to any garment. I look on high for direction while people trusting in garment. I earned my stripes and I wore them like old Adidas. So when my soul is fragile and worn like older sneakers, I pour my thoughts on wax and you blaring them over speakers. Of course, I will be fine. I got faith like them old believers. Believe me, I'm not conceited. I know the Creator sees me. With Him backing me, these problems like breakfast, they over easy.
Making sure I give all praises to the top. Bold as a lion, young David with a rock.
All praise to the top. Whipping like I run it from the cops. I ain't gotta worry about no ops. Young David, I stay with the rock. I'm blessed.